Hey guys, tonight we begin with something both scandalous and strangely tender. A story about velvet curtains drawn shut, champagne glasses left half full, and the secrets that whisper inside hotel rooms. We begin with Marilyn Monroe, a woman adored by millions, yet trapped in rooms where desire, power, and loneliness dance together. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now imagine the sound of city lights humming outside a grand New York hotel. The curtains are heavy, blocking out the street lamps, while the carpet beneath your feet feels soft, like it has absorbed decades of footsteps, secrets, and scandals. You walk down a long hallway, lined with brass fixtures and faint perfume left behind by countless women. Behind one of those doors, Marilyn is waiting. She sits by the window, her blonde hair catching the glow of the bedside lamp, her lips painted like ripe cherries. She looks out onto the city, but her thoughts are far from the glittering skyline. Marilyn Monroe, born Norma Jean, was more than a star. She was an idea, an image, a flame people wanted to touch but never truly hold. In her hotel rooms, men of power arrived, politicians, moguls, even presidents. They came not just for her beauty, but for the thrill of being near someone who could ruin them with a single word, or lift them into ecstasy with a single smile. The air in those rooms was heavy, almost intoxicating, with perfume, alcohol, and the dangerous tension of secrets that could never reach the newspapers. In one such room, the story goes, a powerful man lingered with her until dawn. His tie was undone, his shoes abandoned by the bed. The whispers between them were not of love, but of deals, of betrayals, of promises that could not be kept. Marilyn listened, nodding, her laughter soft, her body both comfort and curse. These rooms held more than passion, they held scandal. Reporters sniffed at the edges, chambermaids caught glimpses in mirrors, and shadows lingered under the doorframe like ghosts of curiosity. But Marilyn's voice was soft, like a lullaby. She could soothe even the most corrupted of men who hid behind their polished shoes and their lofty titles. Yet in the secrecy of those rooms, they were reduced to whispers and trembling hands, corrupted kings of the modern world. Picture the scene. The wallpaper gilded with patterns of roses, the sheets white but wrinkled from restless hours, the ashtray filled with lipstick-stained cigarettes. A bottle of bourbon stands on the dresser, its golden liquid catching the lamplight. Marilyn leans back, her silk robe slipping from her shoulder, her eyes half closed. She looks like a goddess and a prisoner all at once. For even as she played the temptress, she longed for something gentler, something purer, something that never seemed to find her. Whispers tell us of her affairs with John F. Kennedy, with his brother Robert, with producers and moguls whose names remain locked in diaries. Each encounter was a gamble, like dice rolling across the velvet floor. These men had empires at stake, nations to rule, reputations to guard, yet they risked it all for stolen hours in hotel rooms, where history was rewritten, not in treaties, but in touches and sighs. And yet these rooms also saw her despair. Between laughter and champagne, there were nights of silence. When Marilyn sat alone at the edge of the bed, her hand clutching the telephone as if it could connect her to something more real. She was a mistress to the powerful, but also a child of loneliness, her heart craving the warmth of a mother. The gentleness of a lover who wanted Norma Jean, not Marilyn Monroe. In these contradictions, the scandal deepened. For the world adored her beauty, but few cared for her soul. Think of the medieval kings and their concubines, how they used women to soothe their corruption, to mask their sins behind silken drapes. Marilyn's life was not so different. Only her palace was Hollywood, her throne a hotel bed, her crown the platinum curls that made her a goddess in the public eye. She was both priestess and prisoner, the courtesan of an age that worshipped fame. In those rooms, power and sex tangled together like vines. Men unbuttoned their shirts and shed their authority, revealing themselves not as leaders, but as desperate creatures of desire. They whispered secrets into her ear, secrets of state, of betrayal, of lust, believing the walls would keep their confessions safe. Yet history has a way of leaking through cracks, and rumors became legend. Marilyn's hotel rooms were more than settings. They were stages. Each bed, each mirror, each curtain carried the weight of performance. Behind closed doors, she became whatever they needed her to be. For some, she was the mistress who soothed their guilt. For others, the concubine who inflamed their hunger. For herself, she was a weary actress, caught in a play that never ended, her role defined by others. And as you sink deeper into this story, imagine the contrast. Outside, the streets of New York and Los Angeles glittered with neon, the world rushing, honking, shouting. But inside those rooms, time slowed. The tick of the clock on the nightstand, the soft sigh of sheets, the quiet crackle of a cigarette, these were the rhythms of scandal. The room itself breathed with her, holding in its walls every kiss, every betrayal, every scandalous truth that could never be spoken aloud. Yet Marilyn, despite the softness of her voice and the glow of her beauty, carried shadows. Her hotel rooms were also prisons of pills and silence. She longed to be loved not as a starlet, not as a mistress, but as herself. But the men who came left before dawn, their promises left behind like broken glasses on the floor, and she, the goddess of the silver screen, sat alone with her reflection in the mirror, wondering if love was real or only another performance. What truly happened in Marilyn Monroe's hotel rooms? No one knows every detail, but the whispers remain. They speak of forbidden affairs, of powerful men trembling at her touch, of scandalous secrets exchanged in low voices. They speak of a woman both desired and destroyed, a mistress to history itself. And just like the kings and queens of the past, her story carries a lesson. That even in the brightest light, shadows can thrive. That desire can corrupt, and power can twist love into scandal. Her hotel rooms were not just places of pleasure. They were places where history was shaped in whispers, where scandal became legend, where the line between goddess and prisoner blurred into one. In the quiet of those rooms, Marilyn's presence was both a comfort and a curse. She had the kind of beauty that silenced a room, that made men forget themselves, that pulled them into her orbit like moths to flame. But beauty can be dangerous, and hers became a weapon wielded by others as much as by herself. Men looked at her and saw what they wanted, not who she was. To some, she was the courtesan of the century, the mistress of dreams, a figure of fantasy as powerful as any medieval queen hidden behind silk screens. Imagine the tapestries of history, the palaces of kings where concubines were chosen for their beauty, their charm, their ability to soothe a ruler's darkest moods. Now place Marilyn in that lineage, not in gilded halls, but in the mirrored rooms of Hollywood hotels. The scandal of a king taking his mistress was no different than the whispers of Marilyn with presidents. The world pretended not to see, but the whispers grew, winding their way into headlines and rumors, into half-truths that still echo today. One evening, the story goes, she waited in a suite high above the city. The chandelier glowed softly, and the night outside pressed against the windows like a black ocean. A man entered, a man whose name carried weight in Washington, whose every step was measured, whose public image was flawless. But here in this room, he was only flesh and breath, a man undone by desire. They drank from crystal glasses, the sound of ice clicking like faint bells, and he leaned in to whisper secrets no one else could hear. Marilyn laughed gently, her voice like silk sliding across stone. And in that laugh lay the dangerous intimacy of scandal. The parallel is easy to see. In Rome, the emperor Elagabalus filled his palace with prostitutes dressed as queens. In France, Catherine Howard, young wife of Henry VIII, risked her crown for secret lovers. In China, young Guy Fei captivated an emperor so completely that wars were fought in her name. And in 20th century America, Marilyn Monroe became the woman who made presidents forget their crowns. Each era has its sirens, its mistresses, its dangerous liaisons that remind us power and lust often walk hand in hand. Her hotel rooms bore witness to all of it. You saw the glamour, the pearls scattered on the floor, the perfume bottles half empty, the gowns tossed carelessly over armchairs. They also saw the shadows bottles of pills lined up on the nightstand, tissues crumpled in ashtrays, her soft sobs muffled by pillows. She lived on the edge of scandal, adored by the world, yet in private she was fragile, craving the kind of love that neither fame nor power could offer. The maids who cleaned those rooms whispered stories. They spoke of nights where 2 glasses stood by the bedside, of sheets tangled by more than one body, of laughter echoing down the hall. They saw the remnants of feasts of eaten fruit, lipstick smudged napkins, silk stockings draped over lampshades. And though they could never tell the newspapers, their whispers joined the tapestry of legend. And as the men left those rooms, slipping into the anonymity of night, Marilyn was left behind with the silence. That was the cruelest part. She gave them her warmth, her body, her charm, and in return, they gave her fleeting moments of power, followed by endless hours of loneliness. Like mistresses of old, she was adored in secret, but rarely honored in the daylight. Still, she played her role with grace. She perfected the art of seduction, the tilt of her head, the softness of her lips, the timing of her laughter. In that sense, she was not so different from the prostitutes of Pompeii, whose walls were painted with images of beauty and scandal, selling dreams to men who came seeking escape. Marilyn, too, sold escape not for coin, but for the thrill of intimacy, for the illusion of being desired by someone who seemed untouchable. Yet for all the scandal, there was innocence in her heart. She wanted what every child longs for: love, safety, home. But her fate was to live in borrowed rooms, in spaces that belonged to hotels. 2 men, 2 fleeting encounters. Each room was a cage lined with velvet. Each affair was a storm dressed in silk. Each whisper was another thread pulling her deeper into a web she could never escape. The rumors of her with John F. Kennedy are the most famous. Some say it happened in New York hotels, others in California estates, always behind closed doors where history was unguarded. Their affair was not a romance, but a scandalar collision of power and desire that could never be spoken aloud. Marilyn, The concubine of the modern republic became a symbol of temptation, the mistress who could bring down a king. And perhaps in the end, that is why she was dangerous. But it was not just presidents. Producers, moguls, actors all found their way to her. Some offered her roles. Others offered her jewels. All wanted something in return. Each encounter blurred the line between transaction and affection, between love and scandal. Her rooms became arenas of negotiation, where beauty was both weapon and curse. And what of Marilyn herself? She understood the role she played, but she never stopped yearning for more. In her journals, she wrote of loneliness, of dreams of family, of a desire to be loved as Norma Jean. The world adored Marilyn Monroe, but few cared for the girl who hid behind the makeup. That duality was her tragedy, the goddess desired by all, the woman known by none. The scandal of her life was not just in the affairs. It was in the way the world consumed her, demanded her beauty, her laughter, her body. While denying her the simple right to be human, she was mistress to presidents, yes, but also mistress to an entire society that used her image to soothe its own desires. And like the queens and courtesans of history, she paid the price. As you think of those hotel rooms, picture them not only as stages of scandal, but as temples of fragility. The curtains drawn, the glasses empty, the sheets rumpled, and in the center, Marilyn, both goddess and prisoner. Each room tells a story, each whisper builds a legend, each secret lingers like perfume long after the door has closed. And so, her legacy is not just the blonde bombshell, the movie star, the mistress of scandal. It is also the lesson that behind every image, behind every fantasy, there is a human heart that longs for kindness. The world may remember her for the scandals, for the whispers behind hotel doors, but the truth is softer, sadder, more human. She was both concubine and queen, both mistress and orphan, both scandal and tragedy. The story of Marilyn's hotel rooms only grows heavier as the years drift forward. By the early 1960s, her beauty had become myth, her presence almost divine. But the woman herself was breaking beneath the weight. She drifted between cities, New York, Los Angeles, Palm Springs, each hotel suite, a temporary palace where scandal and silence walked hand in hand. In those later years, the visits grew riskier, the whispers sharper. She was no longer simply an actress. She had become the mistress of powerful men whose names could never be printed in gossip columns. Presidents, brothers, moguls all, tied to her through the soft glow of candlelight and the secrets spilled onto pillows. The risk made every encounter more intoxicating, more dangerous, more like the forbidden liaisons of medieval courts where one wrong whisper could lead to exile or execution. Imagine her in a Beverly Hills suite, the curtains closed tight against the sun. The room glows with the amber hue of lamplight. A tray of champagne sits untouched, the bubbles long gone. A man sits close, his voice low, confiding secrets of power and war, the kind of truths meant for locked vaults. Marilyn leans closer, her hand brushing his, her laughter soft but tinged with sadness. She knows these words are dangerous, but she also knows that she is not just a lover. Here she is a confessor, a mistress whose very silence holds power. The parallels stretch back through centuries. Think of Anne Boleyn, whose whispers to Henry VIII reshaped England, who was adored one moment and executed the next. Or the courtesans of Venice, who learned state secrets while reclining in perfumed chambers. Marilyn walked in their shadow, though her throne was a hotel bed and her crown was her smile. Men trusted her with secrets they dared not share elsewhere, and in doing so, they bound her fate to theirs. The scandal of her closeness to John F. Kennedy has become legend. People say she sang Happy Birthday not just as a performance, but as a declaration, a secret cry across a room filled with eyes. The dress she wore that night shimmered like liquid fire, sewn tight to her body, a garment of temptation that clung like a second skin. To the world, it was a spectacle. To those who knew the whispers, it was a dangerous game played in public view. The hotel rooms before and after were filled with far more than song, but while the world saw glamour, Marilyn's private world was crumbling. Her reliance on pills grew stronger. Each night, the bottles on her bedside multiplied, and the line between rest and escape blurred. In her rooms, the maids sometimes found her asleep with scripts scattered across the bed, lipstick smudged on the pillow, a half-finished glass of wine at her side. To the world, she was the mistress of power. In truth, she was a prisoner of loneliness. These were not just love affairs. They were arrangements woven of power, lust, and fragility. The men who came to her sought comfort, but they also feared her. In her silence lay their vulnerability. Like a concubine in an emperor's court, she could undo them with a single revelation. That knowledge gave her a fleeting power, though it was a dangerous one. For as history shows, mistresses who hold too much power often meet tragic ends. Picture a medieval court in France where a king's mistress might rise to influence, only to be poisoned by rivals. Or a Roman empress accused of sleeping with gladiators, her fate sealed by rumors. Marilyn's fate mirrored theirs, not in execution, but in the slow erosion of her spirit. The whispers of her affairs, her pills, her instability, these became daggers in the hands of those who wanted her gone. One night, alone in her Brentwood home, she sat with the phone pressed to her cheek. Friends recall she called them in desperation, her voice trembling, her words scattered, longed to be heard, to be seen beyond the scandal, but the world only wanted Marilyn, not Norma. And when the news of her death spread, found in her bed, pills scattered. The telephone still in her hand, the hotel rooms that once held whispers became tombs of memory. The scandal did not die with her. In fact, it grew. People speculated, was it overdose? Accident, conspiracy? Did her ties to the powerful doom her? Did her knowledge of secrets make her dangerous? The answers remain buried, but the questions linger like ghosts in every hotel room where she once stayed. The curtains may have been drawn, the glasses emptied, but the air still hums with what might have been whispered there. Marilyn's story belongs not just to Hollywood, but to history's endless saga of mistresses, courtesans, and concubines who lived in the shadows of power. Her beauty was her crown, her rooms, her court, her lovers, her kings. And like so many before her, she was adored, envied, desired, and destroyed. Still, her legacy glimmers. In photographs, she smiles with radiant light, her laughter frozen in time. On screen, she is forever young, forever shimmering. But behind the lens, in those private rooms, she was fragile, human, longing for love. That is the true scandal, not the affairs, not the whispers. But the loneliness of a woman the world claimed to adore, but never truly cared to understand. So, when you think of Marilyn Monroe's hotel rooms, imagine them not only as sites of scandal, but as silent witnesses to the timeless story of power and desire. From emperors to presidents, from concubines to actresses, history repeats itself. The rooms change, The curtains differ, the names shift, but the story remains the same. Scandal, secrecy, and the fragile heart caught between. And in that heart lies the final truth. Marilyn's legacy is not simply that of a mistress to presidents or a goddess of the screen. It is the reminder that behind every figure of beauty, behind every whispered rumor, there is a human story. A story of longing, of fragility, of love sought, but rarely found. And that, perhaps, is the most scandalous truth of all. The death of Marilyn Monroe was more than the end of a life. It was the closing of a curtain, the final scene in a play that had mixed comedy, tragedy, scandal, and beauty in equal measure. Her body was carried from her home, covered by a white sheet, her face hidden from the world that once adored it. But in the minds of millions, she remained forever alive, forever radiant, forever scandalous. The whispers began, almost instantly. Was it really suicide? Or had she been silenced? The idea that a woman like Marilyn, lover to presidents, confidant of moguls, mistress to the untouchable, could be allowed to speak too freely was unthinkable. The rumors spread like wildfire. Some said men in black cars had been seen outside her home. Others claimed her phone lines had been tapped, her conversations recorded. Her very silence became more dangerous than her voice. History is filled with women like her, women whose intimacy with power made them vulnerable. Think of Lucretia Borgia in Renaissance Italy, accused of poisoning lovers at lavish banquets, or the mistresses of Louis XV, hidden away in gilded apartments, while France gossiped and plotted. Marilyn's story belonged to that lineage. She was not just an actress. She was a courtesan of the modern age, her body and her presence intertwined with secrets that could reshape nations. Her hotel rooms had been places of laughter, of intimacy, of whispered promises. But after her death, they became haunted in memory. People imagined the sheets where she had lain, the telephone she had pressed to her cheek, the mirrors clouded with her reflection. Each room became a shrine to mystery, a reminder that beauty, when bound to power, can be both a crown and a curse. What made her story so piercing was the contradiction. To the world, she was Marilyn Monroe, the goddess in white dresses, the blonde mistress of every man's dream. But behind closed doors, she was Norma Jean, the orphan girl, still searching for belonging. The men who visited her rooms, presidents, producers, perverted kings of industry, saw only the goddess. They wanted her body, her presence, her silence. But few ever looked into her eyes long enough to see the child who had grown up without love. That is why the scandal remains so sharp. It is not simply the affairs themselves, though they were enough to shock nations. It is the cruelty of desire without care, power without tenderness. The kings of old would keep concubines in chambers, their beauty displayed, their silence expected. Marilyn lived the same fate in a modern age. The rooms were her chambers, her visits carefully arranged, her body cherished, but her soul neglected. Even in her final months, the pattern continued. Witnesses recall she met with men of influence, sometimes in suites at the Beverly Hills Hotel, sometimes in the secrecy of Palm Springs retreats. She played her part, laughed her laughter, leaned close to hear words of power. But when the doors closed behind her, she was left in silence. The crowds adored her, the men desired her, but no one stayed. This is the great tragedy that echoes across centuries. The woman who becomes an icon, but never a companion. In the medieval courts, mistresses often ended in isolation, exiled once their beauty faded. In the palaces of Rome, courtesans were dismissed when their secrets became too dangerous. Marilyn joined their number. Her beauty never faded in the eyes of the world, but her silence became a risk too heavy to bear. And so, her death became the final scandal. Some insist it was an accident, a night of too many pills, too many tears. Others are certain it was murder, a silencing of the mistress who knew too much. The truth may never be known, but the effect was the same. Her story ended not in laughter, not in love, but in loneliness, a tale as old as power itself. Yet even in death, her presence lingered. Those who entered her old hotel rooms after her passing swore they could feel her there. The scent of her perfume, the echo of her laughter, the weight of secrets still clinging to the walls. Like the chambers of forgotten queens, those rooms became relics, holding the memory of a woman who had walked among kings and presidents, but had never found her own throne. And what do we take from this story? Perhaps the reminder that scandal is not always glamorous, that behind the headlines and rumors lies a person fragile, searching, human. Marilyn's life was a mirror of every mistress, every concubine, every courtesan who ever risked her heart in the shadow of power. They were adored, yes. They were desired, yes. But they were also discarded, silenced, forgotten. Except Marilyn is not forgotten. Her name endures. Her smile adorns posters. Her films still flicker on screens. She is the eternal goddess, the mistress of Hollywood's golden age. But in truth, she is something more important. She is a reminder of the danger of power without love, of beauty without belonging, of scandal without compassion. And so when you close your eyes tonight and drift into dreams, imagine her not only in glittering gowns and glowing lights, but in quiet hotel rooms where she sat alone, the world at her feet, yet her heart aching for something real. Imagine her as both the courtesan and the child, the mistress and the orphan, the goddess and the lonely woman. For in that image lies her legacy, the eternal story of desire and fragility, repeated across ages, remembered in whispers, mourned in silence. Legends are born not only from life, but from death. Marilyn's passing transformed her from a starlet into a myth, a goddess whose story would forever be told in whispers and candlelight. Just as Cleopatra's name still stirs images of seduction and power, Marilyn's became a symbol of beauty, of tragedy, of scandal. In the years that followed, people visited the hotels she once stayed in, the suites where she entertained lovers and whispered her secrets. Some claimed to hear her footsteps in the corridors. Others swore the mirrors still held her reflection, like a courtesan, unwilling to leave her chambers. Every city she had touched, New York, Los Angeles, Las Vegas, kept some remnant of her. A trace of the mistress who had lived too brightly. This is how myths survive. Just as ancient Rome remembered the perverted Emperor Elagabalus for his feasts of sin, and just as France remembered Madame de Pompadour for her whispered influence over Louis XV, America remembered Marilyn, not for the lines she delivered on screen, but for the secrets she carried in her rooms. The rooms became more than spaces. They became stages, shrines to her scandalous role in the play of history. Writers chased the truth of her life. Yet some painted her as the innocent, a victim of men's desires. Others portrayed her as cunning, a seductress who wielded her body like a weapon. The truth was likely both, shifting depending on the hour, the man, the mood. For a courtesan's art is not only in beauty, but in adaptation. Marilyn adapted because she had to. She played the lover, the mistress, the muse, the child. But always, she remained alone when the curtain fell. Yet there was power in her loneliness, power in the way she became untouchable when she was gone. Men who had whispered to her in private now whispered about her in fear. Politicians who had sought her comfort now prayed their secrets would never be revealed. Even in death, she ruled her hotel rooms. Even in silence, she held the power of scandal. Think of the Renaissance courts, where a mistress might be painted by great artists, her beauty immortalized while her name was hidden in shadows. Marilyn received the same fate. Her image was everywhere, on posters, in films, in photographs framed on bedroom walls, but her true self remained hidden, blurred by rumor and myth. She became not Norma Jean, but Marilyn Monroe, a creation larger than life and forever beyond reach. And perhaps that is why her story still captivates us, because she was both real and unreal. Real enough to have lived, to have suffered, to have loved. Unreal enough to become legend, to live on as the eternal mistress of Hollywood's golden age. In every scandalous tale of kings and concubines, there is a ghost of Marilyn. In every rumor of power undone by desire, there is her shadow. Her hotel rooms still exist, of course. The walls have been painted, the furniture replaced, the sheets long since washed away. Yet those who enter say there is a feeling, a weight in the air, as if the rooms themselves remember. They remember the laughter, the moans, the whispered promises. They remember the men who entered with power and left with guilt. They remember the woman who gave them her smile, her body, her silence, but who kept her heart hidden. And so the myth of Marilyn Monroe became not only about her beauty or her death, but about the eternal dance between power and desire. Just as emperors kept concubines, just as kings hid mistresses in secret apartments, so too did presidents and moguls seek out Marilyn. She was their forbidden fruit, their courtesan in silk sheets, their scandal wrapped in perfume and blonde hair. And when she was gone, their secrets went with her, locked forever in hotel rooms that would never speak. But myths are not only about the past, as they live in the present. Every time her face is printed on a shirt, every time her name is spoken in a new rumor, every time her films are replayed, she lives again. She is the eternal mistress, forever alive in memory. And like all mistresses of history, her true story remains untold, hidden behind doors that only she could open. This is the seduction of scandal. It is not only what happened, but what might have happened. It is not only the truth, but the endless guessing, the rumors whispered at midnight. Marilyn understood this, perhaps better than anyone. She knew her power lay not just in her body, but in the mystery she carried. She gave the world her beauty, but she never gave all of herself. That is why, even now, we still lean closer when her name is spoken. And so, as centuries remember queens and courtesans, as history recalls the scandal of kings and their forbidden chambers, we too remember Marilyn Monroe. She is the bridge between the ancient and the modern, between Cleopatra and Catherine Howard, between Pompadour and the courtesans of Venice. Her story is theirs, and theirs is hers. Beauty, scandal, loneliness, and power, all woven together in the silken sheets of hotel rooms that will never truly be empty. History is full of patterns, and Marilyn's life was one thread in a vast, embroidered tapestry. The details change. The palace becomes a hotel suite. The jeweled crown becomes a glittering Hollywood spotlight butt. the rhythm remains the same. Power desires beauty, beauty seeks love. Scandal grows in the shadows between them. Consider the mistresses of French kings, hidden away in gilded apartments at Versailles. They entered through secret staircases, their perfumes leaving trails in marble halls. Their whispers could undo a kingdom. Now compare this to Marilyn, stepping quietly into a hotel lobby. Sunglasses large enough to mask her face, slipping past journalists who caught only a glimpse of silk and shadow. She too was a mistress who could alter politics, though she wielded no crown. Her very presence was enough to stir panic and desire alike. There were queens in the past who watched their husbands fall into the arms of courtesans, powerless to stop it. And in Marilyn's world, there was a first lady who perhaps understood too well the weight of betrayal, the sting of knowing her husband's nights were not always hers alone. History repeated itself, but with new names, new faces, new chambers. The difference was that Marilyn, unlike the forgotten concubines of emperors, became more than rumor. She became icon. The scandal that once shamed others made her immortal. Where countless mistresses were erased, Marilyn's memory grew brighter with each passing year. She transformed scandal into legend and legend into eternity. Yet in that transformation, she was trapped, just as a painted courtesan's smile is frozen forever on canvas. Marilyn's smile was frozen in photographs, glossy and eternal, never aging, never changing. People adored her image, but forgot her humanity. They remembered the mistress, but not the woman. They loved the goddess, but left the child behind. Her hotel rooms tell this story most clearly. They were places where she could escape the cameras, where she could take off the mask of Marilyn and try to be Norma Jean. But they were also cages. Rooms where she was hunted by reporters, pursued by lovers, consumed by pills and champagne. The same bed where she laughed could also be the bed where she wept. And this duality is the essence of scandal glamour on the surface, sorrow beneath. There is a cruel truth in these tales, whether ancient or modern. The mistress is desired but never safe. The courtesan is powerful but always disposable. Adored, envied, whispered about, but rarely truly loved. Marilyn lived this truth, and her hotel rooms became monuments to it. Howdy. Even the way she died seemed to echo history's cruel hand. Like Catherine Howard, the young queen who lost her life to scandal. Like Lucretia Borgia, accused of sins she may never have committed. Like courtesans who faded once their beauty passed. Marilyn's end was sudden, tragic, and surrounded by whispers. The world mourned her, but the whispers never stopped. They asked, who was with her last? What secrets did she know? Whose hands pushed the final curtain closed? These questions remain unanswered, and perhaps that is why her story endures. A scandal without resolution is a scandal that never dies. Every retelling adds new layers, just as frescoes are painted over again and again, hiding older stories beneath. Marilyn Smith has been painted so many times that no one can separate truth from fiction anymore. She is both victim and temptress, both goddess and ghost. And yet, ... within all this, there is a lesson. The lesson that beauty without peace is a prison. The lesson that desire without love becomes corruption. The lesson that power without kindness leaves only ruins. History teaches us these truths again and again, through queens and concubines, through mistresses and starlets, through kings and presidents. We are meant to see the pattern, to learn from it, but too often we repeat it instead. Marilyn Monroe remains one of the most vivid reminders. She is not only a figure of lust or scandal, but a warning. Her hotel rooms are haunted not by her ghost, but by the choices of men who believed desire was theirs to command. The walls of those rooms whisper still not of sex or beauty, but of loneliness, the kind that cannot be soothed by jewels or kisses. Think of her standing by the window, curtain drawn aside, looking down at a city that adored her image, but never saw her soul. Think of her brushing her hair before a mirror, wondering which face to wear for the night, the goddess or the girl. Think of her in the arms of powerful men, knowing that in the morning they would leave her behind. And think of her last night, when the world outside glittered but inside the room was only silence. This is the story of Marilyn Monroe's hotel rooms. They were not only stages for scandal, but mirrors of history. They reflected the same drama that unfolded in palaces and courts, the same tragedies that claimed queens and courtesans alike. In their walls, we see not only Marilyn, but the whole history of desire and power, repeating endlessly across time. And so, when you hear her name, when you see her smile, remember the truth behind the myth. Remember that beauty is fragile, that scandal devours even those who seem untouchable, and that history is not just kings and battles, but whispers in bedrooms and tears on silk pillows. Remember Marilyn not only as a star, but as a human caught in the oldest story of all, the story of love, lust, power, and loss. Every story must return to where it began. For Marilyn Monroe, it was always the room, the hotel room, with its bed draped in white sheets, its curtains drawn against the city, its silence broken only by the hum of traffic below. These rooms were her refuge, her prison, her stage, her secret world, and in them her legend was born. Think back to the medieval chambers where mistresses whispered to kings. Those walls, too, were silent witnesses to passion and betrayal. Only difference is the decoration: the torches replaced with electric lamps, the stone walls replaced with wallpaper. But the rhythm of desire and ruin remained unchanged. Whether in a Renaissance palace or a Hollywood hotel, the chambers of scandal always echoed with the same sighs. Marilyn's rooms became her crown, gave her power over men who believed they ruled nations. They gave her the space to weave her mystery, to control the distance between what the world thought they knew and what she chose to reveal. Yet the rooms also demanded a price. They devoured her solitude, her joy, her peace. They became tombs for her laughter, collecting her tears like ancient reliquaries. And as the years passed, those rooms became myth themselves. Tourists still seek them, like pilgrims visiting the chambers of long-dead queens. They touch the walls, hoping to feel a trace of her. They imagine the sheets where she lay, the mirrors where she painted her lips, the windows where she watched the lights of the city. In doing so, they join the same long tradition of worshiping scandal and beauty as people once worshipped Cleopatra, or mistresses of Versailles, or concubines of the Forbidden City. The truth is simple, yet painful. Marilyn's hotel rooms remind us of the fragile line between intimacy and spectacle. The moments that belong to her alone have been devoured by the gaze of history. Every whispered rumor became a chapter in her myth. Every shadow on the wall became a clue. Every silence became a scandal. She could never simply rest. She could never simply be. But beyond the scandal, there is legacy. Marilyn became more than a mistress of whispers. She became a mirror for humanity itself. She showed us our hunger for beauty, our cruelty toward, fragility, our fascination with scandal, our neglect of truth. She showed us that power and desire can destroy as easily as they create. And she showed us that behind every legend, there is a person who suffers, who loves, who longs to be understood. In this way, she stands beside the great figures of scandalous history. She is not apart from them, but one of them. She is the concubine who outshone queens, the courtesan who whispered to emperors, the mistress who toppled thrones. Only her stage was different, her crown of light instead of gold, her lovers presidents instead of kings. But the story is the same. The eternal story of beauty and power, desire and ruin. As we close this tale, imagine once more the hotel room. The curtains stir with a faint breeze. The lamp flickers softly. On the table lies a glass half filled, lipstick staining the rim.
Ah!
A dress is folded over a chair, silk shimmering in the dim light.
Ow.
The bed is empty now, but the air still holds the memory of her.
Marilyn Monroe.
Forever present, forever absent, forever legend. Her rooms remain silent, but they speak in their silence. They remind us of her laughter, her secrets, her scandals, her loneliness. They remind us of the endless cycle of history repeating in new forms but always the same at its core. They remind us that behind the myths and the scandals, there is always a human heart. So remember Marilyn not only as a star or a scandal, but as a woman who lived and struggled within her time, just as others before her. Remember her as the modern courtesan of history, the mistress of the American empire, the concubine of Hollywood's golden age. And remember the lesson her story gives us, that beauty without kindness is hollow, power without love is ruin, and desire without truth becomes tragedy. And so, as the curtain falls, the lights dim, and the story ends, we return to the quiet of the room. The whispers fade, the shadows lengthen, the legend rests. Marilyn Monroe's hotel rooms are empty now, but her presence lingers, eternal. She is gone, yet she remains. A myth. A warning. A light that flickered. A flame that burned too bright. And a story that, like all great scandals of history, will never be forgotten.